So the analogy I wanted to use for an alternative risk transfer is recognizing that you have this sort of capital class that's trying to deploy itself into new assets, and a bit of that sort of purchasing audience that's trying to make sure they're getting diversified capital. The university I went to is the University of Wisconsin, and just last week, one of their more famous alumni, who was in the NFL for a number of years, just made an investment into a UK football team.
Ooh.
Following Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney's purchase of Wrexham, which is much more well known from their TV show. But alternative risk transfers is like famous Americans buying English football clubs. But
Compete with that, ChatGPT.
come at me, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
But the idea here is they've made a huge amount of money. They are invested in a huge array of other products and classes and things, right? Whether it's mobile phone companies or TV studios or production companies and things. But they recognize that there's this other area that actually has a huge following. It's sort of very loyal customer base. It's big opportunity. They might know a little bit about it. They're very passionate about this thing now. They're very keen on it. And they're like, that's where I'm going. Going there. Going to put my money behind that.
It's an exceptionally strong analogy. You played it down well, as always. But no, that's very strong, because it applies as well as much to some of the investors from the Middle East, for example, as well, buying football clubs. But the typical trend being there is an existing market of capital for the industry that is quite constrained in some cases. And then I don't want to use this term in a necessarily negative way, but then some tourist capital that is new to the space from a much larger pool of capital, be it pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, etc., that's looking at this space and being like, well, we could get exposure to that. Why not?
Yeah.
And then they figure out some kind of structure to do it with. Yeah. That's brilliant. I'm going to back your analogy versus ChatGPT here. I don't think I can compete with that. One of the things we'll talk about in this episode is sort of the investor proposition, which I think that analogy sums up really well. Getting access to this different, non-correlated class that's a bit different to your usual type of investment for the investors. But the other side of that, of course, is why would you as a cedent look at an alternative risk transfer solution? So I'll let ChatGPT go next maybe and see which angle it takes it, and then I'll have a quick think about whether there's a cedent sort of buyer angle in there as well.
All right.
We're trying to look at ChatGPT's response, but unfortunately, because it's not a human here with us in the studio,
there we go.
It's a bit slow and quiet.
Oh, it's there.
Here it comes.
Okay. So ChatGPT's analogy for alternative risk transfer. I'll bring my computer to screen so everyone can see it. Alternative risk transfer can be likened to a buffet-style restaurant for risk management. In a buffet, customers can tailor their plates based on their specific tastes and dietary requirements. Similarly, alternative risk transfer allows companies to select and combine different risk transfer mechanisms to address their unique risk profiles and preferences. This flexibility enables them to manage risks more effectively, minimize their financial exposure, and ensure the stability of their operations. I give you a B, ChatGPT. B minus, maybe.
I mean, their analogy effectively says the thing about alternative risk transfer solutions is there's lots of choice. But that doesn't really cut to the heart of alternative risk transfer. You can say the same about reinsurance. Go home, ChatGPT. We don't need you.
But this was when we're not going to spend this whole episode rinsing ChatGPT.
Are we not? That's the only note I brought with me.
But I think sometimes, in many ways, when you task it with things, it comes back with like something, but it can feel quite generic at its current phase. Right? Again, I'm not going to say that this is the entire sort of sophistication that this will ever get to. But
what if ChatGPT is ingesting all of the transcripts of our podcast episodes and not only is learning from our critique, but is also considering us an enemy?
I wonder if ChatGPT is sentient, do we hurt its feelings by criticizing its capabilities to compete in analogy battles on reinsurance?
If it was sentient, would it be most natural for it to be a psychopath?
Almost certainly, yes.
So, yes, it doesn't care. It appreciates the feedback in pursuit of its sole goal,
so you've got,
determined by its creator, and yet to be realized by the rest of
its
humanity.
new mission in life is to win analogy battles on the Reinsurance Podcast. So you've got my analogy of American celebrities purchasing British football clubs. You've got ChatGPT's analogy on buffet style allocation.
Yeah, let me think about this. Okay, so what I want to try and get across with an analogy is this concept that, firstly, reinsurance works fine, and you turn to ILS kind of as like an extra bolt on the door. Let's use that as the base analogy. I may expand from here, but like your house is locked, you don't really need much else, but just in case someone's told you about this other way of securing your home, in the case that something really bad happens and you're kind of like, well, opportunistically I can afford it this year or similar, so I'm gonna buy that extra security camera or that extra lock, and you're not really sure if it's going to work because of this concept called basis risk, which we'll come on to, but at least I'm covering the extreme risk that normally doesn't feel as covered as I would want it to be. So it's almost like a diversifying additional safety for the cedent that may or may not work, but is affordable.